up, Keller Williams Realty Partners, coming to you with another educational video from the seller's point of view. Today we're going to talk about the financing contingency. If the buyer of your listing is financing, most likely they will put in some financing contingency in the contract. That's the number of days where the buyer has the opportunity to walk away from the deal if their financing falls through. Now, it doesn't matter if the buyer did something wrong or not. So regardless, if they get a decline letter within the financing contingency time frame, they will walk away with an earnest money refund. And it's important that your sellers know that. And so I'll go to the reading. Financing contingency. The buyer's finance contingency for your contract is, and we'll say 21 days. What I'm seeing a lot these days is anywhere from 14 to 21 days. Remember, from the seller's perspective, you want the lowest number of days possible. Now, always on the buyer, you want that period of time to be as long as possible. When they send over the initial offer, they may send over something like 28 days or something like that. Any good loan company should be able to get that done in, I would say, 15 to 20 days. So you might want to push back on something like that if you get too long of one. If you get something between 14 and 21 days, I probably wouldn't push back if all the other details of the contract are sound. If for any reason the buyer's financing falls through on his or her loan or it's declined, the buyer will get a full earnest money refund as long as the decline is issued within this contingency period. Let's say the financing contingency ends on July 1st, for example. If they get a letter to you from the lender that says they were declined on June 28th, then they'll get their earnest money refund back. Hopefully you'll find out before then, but I've seen it go to the last day. It's just the way it is. Again, on the seller side, a lot of times you're in the dark, and a lot of times you've got to have a lot of trust throughout the process. There's really not too much you can do about it. Unfortunately, many buyers take advantage of this situation. I have seen buyers quit their jobs and even pull out of the sale of the currently owned real estate as an excuse to get declined. That doesn't happen very much, but it does happen. Sometimes they decided they don't want to be homeowners anymore, and in order to get their earnest money back, they'll quit their job. They'll do something to make sure they get declined. Sometimes the loan officer will just write them a declined letter if they're close enough. That does happen. Again, it's very rare, but it needs to be said to the sellers that this could happen. And again, I say here, it's very rare, but possible. All right, I'm going to hop ahead. I'm going to skip closing for another video, but I do want to hop ahead to possession. As I mentioned earlier, some sellers still think they have a few days or a few hours to vacate the property unless otherwise stated. The home is supposed to be surrendered at closing. So possession of the home takes place immediately upon closing. Again, this is unless there is a temporary occupancy agreement. And keep in mind too, if you do decide to do a temporary occupancy agreement, that can only be up to 60 days. Okay. Many sellers mistakenly think they have 1 to 3 days to vacate, but this is not the case. The buyer will do a final walkthrough right before closing to make sure all agreed upon repairs were done. And you as a listing agent, you want to make sure you're being very proactive and making sure those repairs were not only done, but done in an adequate way. Multiple times I have trusted my sellers to make sure that things were done and they actually didn't get done. Or they weren't done up to a quality that was going to satisfy the buyer. So you want to make sure those repairs were done. They're also going to make sure that the seller didn't take things that they weren't supposed to take. And sometimes they'll take an appliance they're not supposed to. Sometimes they'll have some hidden holes in the wall or whatever that were really big. And those need to be taken care of by the seller. So again, back to the reading. The buyer will do a final walkthrough right before closing to make sure all agreed upon repairs were done and that the house is in the same condition it was before they purchased. Again, this is one of those areas where you want to make sure your sellers know that they need to keep the utilities on. And my suggestion is to make sure you keep the utilities on the day after, because sometimes what happens is you've got a 3 p.m. closing and they tell the utility company, hey, we want to cut the closing or cut the utilities off on, if you're closing, let's say June 25th. Well, sometimes they'll come out early in the morning which keeps the buyer from either being able to reinspect or make sure everything's running correctly. So it's well worth an extra day's worth of utilities to make sure that the house is in good condition. And so you want to make sure those are left on. They will take possession as soon as the closing is over. Be sure to bring all keys and openers to the closing. Anything else that's relevant. Now, there's also one other thing that I didn't go over in the beginning, and I probably should have, but I want to make sure that's of note. I send this to my sellers also. It says, sellers, please note, once your home is listed, it will be pushed out to all the third party, and that's important to know, third party real estate sites like Zillow and Redfin. Occasionally, and this is just occasionally, but the data and pics will transfer over incorrectly. This is rare, but please know it is almost always an issue on their end, and sometimes their data transfer systems are imperfect. So if a client of yours, a seller of yours, brings this to you and tells you, you do need to go look and make sure the error wasn't on your end. From time to time, I've had it to where I put something in incorrectly. That's rare, but it happens. But most of the time, almost every time, I'd say 19 times out of 20, Zillow or Redfin or whatever the company may be, didn't transfer the pictures over correctly, and more importantly, they didn't transfer the data over correctly. Okay? If you see errors, let me know. If it's on my end, I will fix it immediately. And you need to be willing, of course, to do that immediately as the listing agent. If it's on their end, please know that I am powerless in fixing the issues as it is a third-party site and I have no control over that. Now, in years past, and I believe you can still do it, if the seller themselves goes in there and claims it as their home, and I don't know exactly what type of information they have to supply to do that, sometimes they can change it. A lot of times, square footage gets incorrectly placed. The bedroom, bathroom count gets incorrectly placed. Sometimes the pictures are out of order. Sometimes the pictures they decide to highlight are ones that you don't particularly care for. Unfortunately, we're powerless over that. Again, this is a third-party site. In years past, we could go in and change that as agents, but unfortunately, that's, as of the making of this video, July 2nd, 2026, that is not possible. Fortunately, 95% of all activity we will get will be through my ability to post on the FMLS and Georgia MLS and whatever, and to buyers, agents with buyers looking, so it won't be an issue. Most people are going to find the house not through Zillow or Redfin, but they're going to buy it through their agent or find it through their agent. So that's important to note as well. I'm not saying Zillow and Redfin and all those sites don't matter, because they certainly do, but overwhelming majority of the people who are going to come and look at your house are going to find it through their agent. So I'm not saying it's not a big deal, but it's not as big of a deal as not having an FMLS or Georgia MLS or whatever. Okay? Any questions, just let me know, and thanks for watching.